Microsoft would never prioritize one CPU brand over another. I mean, they want all the performance to be equal and fast for everyone that uses their operating system, right? AMD saw this. Their new generation of Zen 5 CPUs has spent 2+ years working on them, hyping them up to be at least 16% faster than their last generation, making them literally the best gaming CPUs or the best CPUs in general for the entire world. After all that, reviews came in and it was just 3% faster in gaming when they released. These findings were shared across everyone. Discussions took place behind the scenes, just baffled how this could happen. PC World even waited to release a review because the data just didn't make sense.
I was looking at the results and the numbers didn't quite match up to what I expected. I was like, wait a minute, what is up with this? This is bizarre.
The common early consensus was that the 9700X was power limited, and in certain scenarios it benefited greatly to have just a little bit of extra juice. However, it was pretty quickly proven that this didn't really matter unless the CPU was under absolute full load. But other than adjusting the power for these chips, there isn't really anything practical that a normal consumer could do. But what if the problem isn't Zen 5, but it's the platform that we're testing it on? Some testing started to come out where Zen 5 was performing better on Linux compared to Windows, which probably got all you Linux nerds pushing up your taped together glasses.
Buddy, you finally figured it out. Linux is the best operating system.
Calm down and go take your meds. You can join my Linux support group channel and my Discord server if you need to treat your condition. When in reality, 70% of people are using Windows. So this performance difference is a major issue. And it seems like AMD was scrambling to figure out what was happening as well. They were confusing the hell out of Steve, saying his numbers weren't wrong, but his numbers also weren't right. What does that even mean? So apparently AMD's internal testing of their new CPUs was getting different results, probably better results compared to hardware on box and presumably basically what all of the other media was seeing. AMD discovered that internally they were actually using a low-level system administrator account in Windows on their test systems.
They asked me if I was testing with an administrator account, which sounds like a bit of an odd question. Of course, we're testing with an administrator account. There's a sort of hidden administrator account that you can activate within Windows, and it has elevated privileges.
This account, for some reason, gave AMD improved branch prediction that the normal version of Windows just does not have access to. This basically allows the CPUs to perform a lot more efficiently and is something that AMD claimed to be significantly improved with their new Zen 5 CPUs. I don't know how AMD hadn't already tested this Windows thing internally, but that's kind of besides the point here. Hardware on Box tested this administrator account and did find a performance improvement, although it seemed like the improvement also applied to Zen 4 CPUs at about the same rate as it did to Zen 5. So this didn't necessarily solve Zen 5 having its issues, and it's still pretty underwhelming. But this means that Windows is holding back AMD CPUs. Soon after, AMD made a blog post explaining that they worked with Microsoft, and in the next Windows feature update 24H2, the improved branch prediction will be making its way to the normal version of Windows. Hardware on Box also tested this and found pretty insane performance gains across the board. Again, this is also including Ryzen 7000, is about the same rate, but 10% on average just from a Windows update is frankly unheard of. When does that happen? Another cool thing is Microsoft informed Tom's Hardware that they would be back porting the update into the current version of Windows 11 23H2. This patch is going to be called KB5041587, claiming it should get most of the performance upgrades that 24H2 does without having to wait for that version or go to a preview build of Windows. And you know, Microsoft makes this really clear in the patch notes for these updates that we're going to be getting those performance increases. Wait, what the? This major performance increase is not in the patch notes for Windows? Microsoft conveniently didn't put it there? Is Microsoft intentionally hiding this performance? They didn't ever make a statement about the update in general with AMD CPUs. Plus, when you add in the fact that AMD performance used to be matching or getting slightly better to this update when it was in Windows 10 compared to Windows 11 as Hardware Unboxed tested, it looks like they could have been aware about what has been happening all this time and possibly weren't doing anything about it. It's kind of funny how AMD CPUs have been dealing with this for years, but Intel ones are chilling. But we can't know that without having data. And look what I have, a massive pile of data. This is where I have been, getting these funny little juicy numbers and being extremely frustrated with these versions of Windows.
Because I went to the dev build and now I'm like stuck. Once you're in dev, you can't go back to normal. I'm gonna end up having to reset Windows completely on this system so I can get back to the normal base build. Brother.
Basically, I've had a blast testing all of this Windows stuff, but regardless, this data is super important and I need to get this information to you guys. I was able to test 3 different versions. 23H2, which is the current version of Windows with and without the KB5041587 patch. I've memorized the number because I've had to say it so many times. When I tested with and without the patch, I did it by uninstalling it. So this actually does affect Windows because my start menu was broken when I did that. But I don't know how else you would test the patch because it auto downloads that patch in Windows Update immediately when you install that version of Windows. And I was also able to test the 24H2 preview version of Windows. But let me know if you do find different results with this. I was also able to test 3 different types of CPUs. A Ryzen 9 5900X 12 core Zen 3 processor from 2020, a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, which is an 8-core processor from Zen 4 in 2022. So 2 Ryzen parts from different generations. Unfortunately, I don't have a Zen 2 part, and a Zen 1 part I actually do have a 1600, but that could mess up my install of Windows on my main AM4 system where I tested the 5900X. I just don't have buco loads of extra motherboards and SSDs to run a bunch of Windows installs. And I also tested the Intel i7 13700K, also from 2022. This part has 2 types of cores on it. Performance and efficiency cores. If you could call them efficiency, they still draw a lot of power. So maybe changes to Windows with these 2 types of cores could affect it pretty heavily as well. I tested all this across 16 games. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk, Dragon's Dogma 2, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Last of Us Part 1, Overwatch 2, Plague Tale Requiem, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Resident Evil 4, Remnant 2, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Starfield, and Black Myth Wukong. Some of these had some very interesting results, like refusing to launch in some cases, or just having insane performance in some cases. I did test all of these games in very CPU intensive areas, or at least as much as I could. I also threw in a couple more production-esque tests with Cinebench R20 and Blender Benchmark 4.2.0, just to get an idea if this update affects more than just gaming. Let's start off with the fastest gaming CPU in the world, the 7800X3D, and see if this update can make it go even faster. The Cinebench results are surprising. You would think that a general improvement to the performance that Cinebench would probably change. Without the patch, it is a multi-core score of 6960 and a single core of 692. This was done by taking the best of 3 runs, and with the patch, we're at 6962 and 688. With the preview version of 24H2, it is 6923 and 686. These are all pretty much margin of error, so nothing really to make note of, except for the 24H2 was actually noticeably slower in multi-core. Not an insane margin, but noticeable. With the Blender benchmark, it was pretty much margin of error with these. So at least the productivity tests that I did, the 7800X3D really isn't affected by these updates, although that does not necessarily say the same for gaming. With the patch, I found some significant gains in games like Cyberpunk. It averaged 152 FPS without the patch, then with it, it got 171. That is a 13% uplift just from a Windows update. And by the way, Let me know here. I got the side-by-sides, what you think about them. The number that they scored is up top along with the percentages compared to the other ones. The 1% lows are just right along next to it just to show if the game was stuttery or not. I'm trying to give you guys as much information as I possibly can while also showing how the game is running in real time so you can get an idea of that as well. But let me know what you think. The Cyberpunk gains here are absolutely huge. The next biggest gain that I saw is in Overwatch 2. We went from 525 FPS before to 575 after. That is a 10% improvement. I mean, the 7800X3D is already extremely faster, over 500 FPS, but 10% is massive, especially from an update. If you have a lower end chip, this could be a complete difference maker. Starfield also sees big gains, 118 FPS before to 128 FPS after, 8% improvement. For all of 20 of you that are still playing Starfield, this will probably change your life. The thing is, other than these 3 games, the performance increases are pretty moderate. This may be because the 7800X3D is just so fast and my RTX 4080 Super could be GPU limited even at 1080p, because the only other major swing that we saw was in Dragon's Dogma 2, and that was a 4% gain here. Then if we flip the script, what I find pretty odd is the insane regression in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, going from 169 FPS before to 149 after the patch, 12% slower. Now the averages here are taken from the FPS measured from the in-game benchmarks, so they do look a little bit different than what's actually shown on the overlays on the screen from the actual test. And in Baldur's Gate 3, 246 FPS before to 224 FPS after. That is a 9% regression in performance. But it is weird that with this new patch, it's not always faster on the 7800X3D. In fact, with the ups and downs factored in, without the patch, it averages 178 FPS across all these 16 games, and with the patch, it averages 179 FPS. This is calculated by adding up all the FPS and just taking the average, but in some cases like Overwatch, the FPS can be so high that each individual frame is less valuable, so it kind of skews the results in favor of the patch. If you actually take the average of the percentage differences between them, then the patch is actually 6% slower on average across all these games. It's really not a good showing, at least for me, for this Windows patch that is supposed to help rise in performance, though in some cases you can find pretty significant gains when it's working right. Thing is, the story doesn't really look better for the preview build of 24H2 against the non-patch 23H2 build. It does also see great gains in Cyberpunk, 10% faster, Overwatch 2 also 10% faster, Starfield again is 8% faster here, and Remnant 2 actually got a significant leap up to 6% faster after this preview build of Windows. All for a Windows update that really is not shabby, but it also has the same flaws. Like in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, it's 12% slower, and Baldur's Gate 3, it's 4% slower. That one, I don't think it's really that bad. 4% is not that crazy. But what is kind of wild, any RE engine game just does not launch. I would have loved to have tested Dragon's Dogma 2, but nah. RE engine don't launch. Resident Evil 4, I wanted to test that game as well, does not launch. I also tested RE7, another RE engine game, just to check, and that game just showed up with this horrific mess on my screen. I seriously thought just by launching this game on this version of Windows that I bricked my graphics card or my capture card, because it did not stop doing this even after I closed the game. So this is not good. This version of Windows can be pretty buggy. These are the only RE engine games that I own, but I can almost guarantee if I had Street Fighter 6 or Monster Hunter, something like that, that are also based off of RE engine, probably would have found those to be broken as well. I'm not really sure what's happening here. I even tried reinstalling graphics and chipset drivers just to make sure it wasn't something on my end. It just did not change a thing. So let me know if you know what's happening or if you got it working yourself. That would be interesting. So that combined with the pretty lackluster hit or miss performance, excluding the games that didn't launch, literally led to the exact same average FPS difference compared to the unpatched version of 23H2 Windows. At least in the games that I tested, this is not a huge leap for the 7800X3D. However, AMD states this update should help Zen 3 as well. So let's check out the Ryzen 9 5900X. This might apply to more of y'all who probably haven't moved on from AM4, and I don't blame you. AM4 is a great platform, and that's just like me. Like, this thing is my main system. The 5900X is my main system. It is the only place that I have to test it. So the place that I'm testing this 5900X sadly isn't a clean install of Windows. Can't do that much about it. And also all of the tests are being recorded locally on the same PC, which does affect the performance a little bit, though I do use the NVIDIA app to record and it does minimize the damage or the performance hit that it causes. Also being CPU limited, not GPU limited, it does help when the video encoding is taking place on the GPU instead here. Anyways, in Cinebench, this gets interesting. The 5900X patch and no patch versions are actually tied exactly in multi-core, and the patch one just squeaks a little bit ahead in single core performance. Although that is basically margin of error, so just take it with a grain of salt. Also, taking a look at the 24H2 build, the multi-core score was genuinely faster here by 100 points, which isn't exactly a ton, but it's pretty good, and it is statistically significant. The Blender benchmark though doesn't really show a lot here. They're all pretty much the same. Let's check out gaming. The 5900X is strange, especially in 24H2, but I'm gonna have to hold you on the 24H2 version just a little bit. But let's look at the unpatched versus patch version of 23H2 first. The biggest gain that I found again is in Cyberpunk. The patch version is 7% faster, which translates to 89 average FPS going to 95 average. Definitely noticeable. I just wanted to point out just how crazy of a difference we are seeing with the 5900X versus the 7800X3D. When the 7800X3D, we're talking 160 average FPS in Cyberpunk compared to the 5900X, which is in the 90s. Granted, this is on my bloated Windows install, and I actually have pretty slow RAM in the system currently because I am choosing stability on it, but damn. The 7800X3D is insane. Luckily, because of this huge performance difference, it all but guarantees that we're CPU limited in every single game here, where the 7800X3D could sometimes be towing the line for my RTX 4080 Super. The thing is, other than Cyberpunk, the patch didn't really do a whole lot for my Zen 3 CPU. Most games, it was just matching the performance within margin of error. It was feeling just a little bit spicy. It went to like a 3% improvement in Baldur's Gate 3, for example, with the patch going from 118 FPS to 121. Like, oh boy, 3%, we're getting a little bit crazy out here. And also in Resident Evil 4, it was feeling just as crazy with a 3% improvement from 149 FPS to 154. Microsoft is really cooking with this one. On the other side, there was some stinkers, like in Horizon Forbidden West. We saw a 5% regression here, going from 101 FPS to 94 on average. The most depressing part is 101 to 94. I mean, we're going under 100 FPS. That basically makes the game unplayable in the eyes of a PC gamer. So that's pretty sad. I think this update is a huge L in that case. Surprisingly, we also see a regression in Overwatch 2 by 5%. Weird because the 7800X3D actually saw some of its biggest gains in Overwatch 2, but that same thing is not true for the 5900X. The FPS is dropping from 352 to 336. It's still over 300, so I think the game might be playable, but it's odd to see a drop in performance. And the worst drop that we saw was actually in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, a 16% regression. 144 before the patch to 121 after. And that is depressing. It's just like with the 7800X3D. I have no clue why the performance is lackluster here with this update in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. You would think that this update would make things better, right? Updates don't always make things better, I guess. And I'm looking at you, Gearbox. But back to the 5900X. The ups and downs again with this update, it kind of left the 5900X with the patch to be actually 1% slower than without the patch. I mean, that difference is kind of negligible on average. The updates, for me at least, perform about the same in my eyes. But some games perform better and then some perform worse, which is actually kind of sad. Why is it even more inconsistent now? The 5900X is a system that I daily drive for pretty much everything, and sadly, I'm not going to be seeing really any noticeable performance increase on my main system. And that means that millions of you guys out there that are probably still on AM4, at least with Zen 3, probably won't be seeing a huge difference either with this patch. Granted, this is in my specific situation, and yours may be different, just like how Hardware Unboxed tested. Literally, depending on the RNG of your Windows install that you have, for whatever reason, it could just be bad and things perform worse. Steve literally called these bad installs of Windows. We're playing the Windows install lottery now. Although, let's talk about the preview version of the 24H2 update that will be coming soon to Windows. And I hate to be the Grim Reaper here to rip your excitement away, but the 24H2 update was not good for me, at least on the 5900X. 5%. 5% is the biggest improvement that we see, and it was in Remnant 2. This update takes it from 80 to 84 average FPS. It's statistically significant, but I guarantee you, if you didn't have an FPS counter on the screen, that you could not tell the difference. Then in the other games, you'd be lucky to even match or slightly beat the same performance with this update. The only games that I did are in Cyberpunk, Hellblade 2, and Remnant 4. Everything else was lower, at least by a little bit. Although on the bright side, at least the RE Engine games worked on the 5900X on this preview 24H2 build of Windows. Can't say the same for the 7800X 3D. The thing is, there is a lot of regressions, and in particular, some rough runs are Starfield. It's 8% slower on 24H2. Last of Us Part 1 is 10% slower on 24H2, which takes the average FPS from 108 to 97. Again, that's below 100 FPS, which basically deems the game unplayable in the eyes of PC gaming. Overwatch 2 has a massive decline. It's 14% slower on 24H2, going from 352 average FPS to 302, which means we lost 50 FPS, and that hurts. But it's not as bad as how much Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is hurting. I have no clue what is happening here. I even tried uninstalling and reinstalling graphics drivers to no avail. Clearly the game is just running like garbage for 24H2, at least in my case, and the 1% low numbers that are built into the benchmark said it was at 82. Huh? Like, that has to be wrong. This game looks like you're playing Smash Ultimate Online with McDonald's Wi-Fi. The game is completely broken for the 5900X on 24H2. Again, just like the RE Engine games not launching on the 7800X 3D on 24H2, I would hope that these bugs are going to be ironed out for Windows by the time this update actually releases. Again, this is a preview build of Windows, so expect some bugs, but these are pretty major bugs. And that means in totality that the 24H2 update just was not good for the 5900X. With every game that I tested factored in, I found it to be actually 5% slower than the unpatched version of 23H2 build, which is kind of embarrassing. Now, if you completely exclude the broken avatar test, then it is only 3% slower. Oh boy. 3% regression with the Windows update. Let me know if you experience things different on your Zen 3 processor, or if this is actually par for the course. I sincerely hope that it isn't, but I'm not going to bet on it. This Ryzen testing with these Windows updates has got me feeling a little crazy. I mean, at times the results are really good, and then in others we see a regression, which gives me a little bit of depression and makes me want to send a message to Microsoft or AMD or whatever just to see what is happening. Like, did I do something wrong? I literally have no clue. All I know is that the Ryzen performance, regardless of the update, can be very inconsistent. What is up with that? But you want to know what is not inconsistent? Intel. Now, just to let you know, the 13700K, it might be news to you, is actually a very fast CPU despite all of the shit surrounding Intel right now. So in these tests, like the 7800X 3D, I wasn't always CPU limited, and sometimes the 4080 Super could not keep up. So just keep that in mind, though it was more frequently CPU limited than the 7800X 3D. Regardless, let's talk Cinebench. All of them are hovering around 11,700 points for the multi-core score. Although the 24H2 build is actually about 50 points behind, which isn't huge, but it is statistically notable. So there you go, you can note it. Other than that, the single core scores are basically identical. The same thing is with this Blender benchmark. virtually identical scores here on the monster and junk shop runs, but again, with the 24H2 build on the classroom test, it's actually a little bit slower at 83 samples, compared to 90 and 89 on the 23H2 builds for whatever reason. I don't know why it's a little bit slower here. So this is similar to the AMD systems. The production/synthetic full load CPU tests didn't see anything that significant, so let's just move on to gaming. Just to start off this section with a reference point, the non-patch versus patch versions of Windows for the 13700K on average performance ends up being exactly the same. The biggest game for the 13700K is Spider-Man Miles Morales with ray tracing on, going from 106 average FPS to 110, which is an increase of 4%. Cyberpunk was also 3% faster, but these are basically the only notable increases to performance. Other than that, the greatest dips were only up to 2% slower, and that is in Horizon Forbidden West, Plague Tale Requiem, and Starfield. So the patch doesn't really seem to affect the 13700K as much. The peaks and valleys are relatively consistent compared to what AMD is facing here. And against the 24H2 build of Windows, it is pretty much the exact same story. Most games range from the same performance to just a bit faster or a slight regression, basically margin of error though. The worst I tested was in Horizon Forbidden West, which is 4% slower. However, I think this is actually just a GPU limitation going on here because the 7800X3D was getting similar FPS, and that is a faster CPU. And the only freak case that I found is in Hellblade 2. For whatever reason, 24H2 is just 12% faster here. I have no clue what's happening in this game, but going from 124 to 139 FPS is massive. It almost makes me think that I did something wrong, but I honestly have no clue what it would have been. So take it as you will. Because of the massive leap in Hellblade 2, we do see an average improvement of 1% going to 24H2 versus 23H2 unpatched on the 13700K. The thing is, I know this is mostly supposed to be an AMD update addressing the problems with not using the branch prediction properly on their CPUs, but at the same time, damn. Even though at the end of the day, the performance averages out to be similar on the updates with Ryzen, the performance between the updates can be really different and varied compared to Intel. The valleys are deeper and the peaks are higher on Ryzen, just less consistent. What's crazy is how long it's even taken Microsoft or AMD to address the problem with the 24H2 version of Windows, or now with the KB504-1587 backport patch. I mean, Windows 10 has consistently had better performance compared to Windows 11, and you're telling me that no one at Microsoft or AMD for that matter has found that Windows isn't fully utilizing Ryzen. Actually, in fact, this Ryzen performance lift has been available on the admin account already in the 23H2 build of Windows baked in, but it hasn't been applied to the base version of Windows, the version that 99.5% of the world uses. I think that's kind of wild. This next one might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's a funny coincidence that AMD internally just so happens to be using the system administrator account, and that so happens to be the way that Windows is running correctly on Ryzen CPUs. I'm just putting two and two together. It isn't a perfect conclusion, but it's kind of odd. AMD has worked with Microsoft to get Ryzen running properly on Windows, but so has Intel. It's interesting how smooth the rollout has been with Intel's performance and efficiency cores when in relation to Windows, other than Intel royally f***ing up 13th and 14th gen. Besides that point, there has been some hitches to getting these P and E cores fully utilized in certain programs, but that pretty much seems to be the worst of it, and it doesn't even compare to all the issues that a Ryzen 9 7950X3D or their 9950X chips have had with core parking with Windows, and it can actually significantly impact the performance if Windows doesn't control what cores are being used on the CPUs to take full advantage of it. Like, I'm not exactly accusing Microsoft of actually favoring one company over another. However, the whole situation that I'm finding here, there's quite a bit of evidence that it's looking kind of odd, especially when all this unrealized performance for AMD is conveniently happening when Intel has been having so many problems keeping up with AMD as a company. How does a performance oversight go overlooked for so long for AMD. Regardless though, with this new update that is supposed to improve Ryzen CPUs, I hope that any bugs that it's having here that I experienced can get ironed out, because I don't think we should be seeing a regression in performance with this update at all. Hopefully the bugs with RE Engine not launching on my 7800X 3D system and Avatar being broken on the 5900X with 24H2. I hope that these things can be fixed. I sincerely hope that I tested everything properly as well, because this got me going a little bit crazy. Windows Update leaves me guessing sometimes. It is super frustrating. I completely reinstalled Windows for these tests, and I just hope that I did everything I possibly could. That kind of begs the question though. Let me know what your experiences have been with these new AMD updates for Windows. Hopefully you've had better luck. I can only show you what I can show you. And that's that. This project has been an insane amount of work, and I really hope it helps you out and gives you perspective on this whole situation. I hope Microsoft isn't favoring one company, and hopefully I'm misreading the situation. Anyways, that's been it for me. Have a good one. Peace.